In a world that seeks daily to comprehend social, cultural, political and religious action and ideology, the word ethics gets thrown around a lot. One man who finds himself at the heart of the spectrum of ethical discussion is Dr. Simon Longstaff, head of the St James Ethics Centre in Sydney.
To the extent that I represent for some people a voice, if you like, the ethical voice in conversations, that raises questions about how do you go about doing it. And for me, there are a couple of simple principles I apply. Probably the first one is not to take myself or the organisation I lead too seriously. There's a very important philosophical reason for that. As an ethics centre, the last thing you want to do is to become a source of authority to which other people defer. The whole point about ethics is to try and encourage other people to live an examined life and to be responsible for their own decisions. The next principle is always to be prepared to speak truth, and particularly to try and speak truth to power. So never be curbed in your inclination to say what might need to be said, but not in a dogmatic way, but rather in a sense to present people with the things which sometimes they know within themselves but they've not been able to articulate. And just the third thing is to do this in a language which is accessible. Too often philosophy is presented in a technical language which is sometimes necessary, but the great skill of philosophers throughout history has been able to take complex ideas and to make them part of a conversation for everybody. Well, in the right language, everybody's interested. They want to have that conversation, and I've not found a person who isn't capable of engaging in that kind of discourse. Well, one of the challenges is when you're communicating with people with different levels of understanding of ethics, or maybe even different education levels, is that there might be a temptation to think that you're kind of adjusting everything down or up depending on where you go. What I've found actually is that a pretty even approach is the better thing to do. So if I'm talking to other academics, occasionally a bit of jargon will slip in, but I find that using the kind of the simpler concepts that are at the essence of an argument is a powerful thing to do there. Equally, when talking to people in the community, whatever their background, the last thing you ever want to do in this area is to give any sense that you might be talking down to people. Rather, you seek to engage in the way that you would with everybody else. And because the process is one of genuine engagement, where typically you're not trying to prove someone wrong in a conversation, you're trying to explore an issue and assist them to come to a better informed decision. In doing so, then there's a kind of an evenness of tone which I think works well. There may be some expectations from people that to head up an ethics centre you have to be an especially virtuous person. That's not something which I accept. I found it very uncomfortable on occasions when people have sort of spoken with me as if I have achieved or aimed to achieve some status or other than the ordinary kind of person that I really happen to be. There are times when I'm abrupt with people in a way that I shouldn't. Do I ever equivocate? Perhaps yes, I do. Do I ever tell the occasional lie? Not nowadays. I try to, because I find that that's quite an important thing. But I suppose it's also important for me to know that when you're doing this work, you've got to do it with a fair amount of humility, because if you ever put tickets on yourself, you'd be a disaster in the job. One of the things that the Ethics Centre is really bad at is communicating in general with the public. We've never quite worked out how to do this properly. We have a newsletter called Living Ethics, which goes out, but we've not yet worked out how to have a really engaging website or to use social media. And what that means, I think, which is a really big strategic weakness for the centre, is that there are vast numbers of people in the Australian community, and I think vast numbers of people, especially younger people, who wouldn't even have a clue that the Ethics Centre exists or how they might communicate and engage with it. And so one of the major pieces of work that we've got on our agenda at the moment is to try and become more proactive in the way we communicate using far more relevant channels.
The St James Ethics Centre recently spearheaded a program of ethics classes in New South Wales schools, and the ensuing debate proved that ethics advocacy treads a fine line with religion.
You might wonder about my own beliefs. Well, I'm a Christian. That's where I draw my faith from. I'm not a particularly conventional one in the sense that I don't spend every Sunday going to church. But the fact that I have a personal religious belief also, and particularly that belief, commits me to working with people of all faiths and no faith. And one of the questions that people think is, well, to what extent do you need to be respectful of people with their different beliefs and sensibilities? I think there is some basis for doing so. But at the same time, I think that you also need to be able to have the kind of conversation which will add value to them and not allow a pre-existing view to close down the possibility of an important conversation. A powerful thing to do is genuinely to take people entirely seriously in terms of the claims they make about their beliefs. And you can do that whether it's in a religious, cultural context here or anywhere else for that matter. I do actually believe that the best way to operate is to live an examined life, which means that that's something which is open to everybody who has the goodwill to